Hi Bimanto. Yeah, I'm still here at the World Economic Forum on East Asia with Edwin Utama from Boston Consulting Group. Hi Edwin, how are you doing?
Very good.
We spoke earlier this week about talent, and it seems that in virtually every conversation that we have here, we come back to talent. So let's talk about something different, infrastructure. What are the challenges going ahead? Let's walk it through in phases. Planning?
Yep. Well, I think as mentioned, I think you're right. First of all, infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges in Indonesia. So we had a breakfast meeting this morning. We invited top leaders in Indonesia, and they mentioned two things. One is talent, and the second one is infrastructure. When it comes to planning, 40% of the mega projects actually fail in the planning stage.
40% fail?
40% fail. And for those who made through, maybe 60% are actually getting delayed. And this is because of planning and also implementation. So one thing that the government can do is they have a body called KPPIP. So this is a body who is supposed to identify the top priority projects and also making sure that the top priority projects get implemented. Now I think we must make sure that this body is doing his job properly. This is about making sure that the top projects are being monitored and issues are being understood and also solved. I think this is the only way that big projects are actually getting implemented in Indonesia.
Why are they failing? What are they coming up against?
Yeah, for a number of things. Number one, for example, is a lack of high quality preparation. So for example, the feasibility study is not done properly. So when the project is being evaluated and being planned for being executed, the quality is not up to the level that is satisfactory for the investors, for example. Right? Another reason why the project is failing is because there are multiple elements that needs to be right in order for the projects to go through. And there is simply no one actually looking at all these things that are moving together, and that's the reason why the project is also failing.
Well, what measures do you think they can take to improve that? Do you think the one-stop permit system as the BKPM is something that needs to just be expanded, or is it on its own, a system like that, not enough?
So that's certainly one thing that needs to be happening. Right? The other thing that needs to be happening is there has to be a body who is also making sure that the projects are being implemented, and that every stage leading to the closure of the project is being also monitored, and issues are being uncovered and addressed properly. So everyone that is involved in the project must know the key performance indicator, the things that needs to be in place to make sure that this is successful. And there has to be someone who can make decisions, very importantly, to address challenges. Because often the challenge is actually not contained in one department, it is actually happening across departments. So you need to have someone strong in the government, high up, that can make decisions.
So if it's a question of leadership, are we seeing that kind of leadership being displayed at the moment?
Well, I think in terms of intent, yes. I think the government is showing that they are open to investors. They are open to making sure that issues are being addressed. I think one of the biggest challenges now is really executing, the plans, right? And that requires leadership, one thing, but also that requires, capability for the rest of the government agencies. I think in terms of setting the vision, the leadership setting the vision, giving the directions, I think the government has it. But it's really about mobilizing the whole organization across multiple agencies to go to one direction. That is one of the main challenges in Indonesia.
Well, how do you, if there's issues as simple as the feasibility studies failing, is this a question of outside agencies need to get greater involvement, or is it that the institutions themselves need reformation?
A number of things. I think one is the government must realize that they have to partner, right? They have to invite, private sector basically to contribute to this issue. And one thing that we can learn from other countries, for example, South Korea or even UK or India, is the fact that they are actually inviting private sector to be involved in the preparation of the projects. So in the case of South Korea, for example, there is a body where the private sector and public sector sit together to just basically identify what is the right thing to do, and creating a higher quality of feasibility study as a result.
Would you say public-private partnerships are the way to go?
It is one way to do it, but I think it's not the only way. The government must realize that at the end of the day, the responsibility for infrastructure is in the hand of the government. And public-private partnership is only one way to address that. It has some benefits. For example, it brings the quality of the private sector. It brings also the external funding to the equations. But you must realize that for the private to come in, they also have return requirements. And so the government must provide guarantee, for example. The government must provide assurance for this to happen. So I would say PPP at the end of the day will be required. It will be one way to address infrastructure, but not the only way to make it work in Indonesia.
Well, we're talking about government there. What can private firms do to make the situation easier? Is there anything that needs to happen in terms of the domestic private sector?
Well, I think for the domestic private sector, it's really about a number of things. One of them is understanding that infrastructure is an asset that can provide benefits to the companies in the long term. Yes, it will not give you immediate return, but it will give you stable and longer benefits over time. I think in general, for people to invest in infrastructure, they must realize that this is one class of asset that provides benefit, but it's not immediate. Right? I think one thing to note also, especially for the foreign investors, that winning in Indonesia requires also investment and understanding of Indonesia. They cannot expect everything to be well prepared before they come in. They can be part of the solution actually, by making sure that the project is well prepared in the beginning, by partnering with the government, by doing and helping the government in doing the master planning, for example. That will help the government goes to the next level.
Well, can they expect their investment to be protected?
Well, they can, but I think at a cost, right? And at the end of the day, the government must be fair as well. So if they protect one investment, they must do it also for the other potential investors.
So would that mean that you'd have to focus on domestic investors and foreign investors separately and differentiate between them, or would you advocate treating them all the same?
There is a difference between domestic investors and foreign investors. So for example, domestic investors will not be exposed as much to the foreign fluctuations, right? Whereas the foreign investors will have to be exposed to foreign currency fluctuations. So in a way, there is a benefit for the domestic investors. But I think the government should not, in my opinion, differentiate between the two, except for some of the structural issues. They must be open to both. And because infrastructure there's a big requirement for infrastructure. I think in total we will need at least 250 billion US infrastructure requirement. Certainly domestic investor, enough will not be enough actually to meet the requirements. So they have to be open to both domestic and foreign.
Right, well, we'll go back to that on investment and on finances for infrastructure when we come back.